Joining us now, John Bolton, who gets a little nostalgic at this time comes around and it's the UN General Assembly. He gets very nostalgic for his days at the United Nations. I know it. He joins us now. Hey, John, how are you?
Good. I'm not losing any sleep over the fact I'm not there anymore, I can tell you that.
Oh, God. I mean, the president spoke at some reform committee event very briefly this morning, John, and Nikki Haley was leading the conversation and thanking all of our allies and Uruguay and all these other countries. And I do hear the lead up to Trump's General Assembly speech tomorrow is whether he will back away even ever so slightly from his nationalist, populist stance and become more of a world leader. What's your sense on what will unfold tomorrow?
Well, the White House has been briefing that the themes are going to be American security, American prosperity, and American sovereignty. And I'd love to see what he says on sovereignty. To me, this is a very big issue. You and I have talked about this many times. I've been writing on it for 20 years. So I hope we do see something interesting there. But the idea that, as Nikki Haley said today, there's a new day at the UN, reform has set in, I think it's a mistake from her point of view. Because honestly, in a year when nothing has changed, she's going to regret saying that. But I think the president's got to be tough on the UN. I think he has to lay out what he expects, which isn't going to happen, but I think he ought to lay it out. When George W. Bush used to come up for his speeches to the UN, he referred to it as his annual trip to the Wax Museum, because that was the reaction he got from the countries listening to the speech. And I expect it'll be pretty much the same tomorrow. Last
week, I think it was on Friday, maybe Thursday, over at the State Department, Heather Nauert, who's the spokesperson at the State Department, was asked about whether the sanctions against North Korea were really significant. I think the Trump administration has come to believe that while it's great that Russia and China signed off on the UN Security Committee to these enhanced sanctions, North Korea is still getting fuel from both China and Russia. Yet Heather said, no, I'm not going to go against the president, she said, but we think these are serious sanctions. Are they really serious sanctions?
That's ridiculous. The resolution itself capped oil exports to Korea at current levels. Now, here's an interesting fact. China has not published its oil export statistics to Korea since 2013. So we don't know what the cap is, and therefore there's no way to enforce it. But I think what you're pointing to really is an even more serious problem within the Trump administration. I think the president takes the North Korean nuclear threat very seriously. It's not at all clear that the State Department does. Yesterday on Face the Nation, Secretary Tillerson said that all of our pressure was designed to bring North Korea back to the negotiating table for what he called constructive, productive dialogue.
What does that mean?
I'm speechless at how to respond to it. That's what we've been trying to do for 25 years. That's why we're at the point when they've almost got deliverable nuclear weapons. And what really underlined it to me is an absolutely stunning op-ed in this morning's New York Times by the Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister Abe, who said, and I quote, "More dialogue with North Korea would be dead end," which is absolutely right. There's nothing more to say to Kim Jong-un and his diplomats. That's 180 degrees away from what Rex Tillerson was saying as recently as yesterday morning. So I think it's another reason why this speech is important for the president. He's been dogged by the dissonance among his advisors on national security, the failure to get command over the bureaucracy. So tomorrow's an opportunity to pull it together.
John, you understand the State Department rings of influence, and I want to get my listeners to really get this issue and why it's important. It's not just some arcane staffing issue. So underneath the Secretary of State, you have the Deputy Secretary of State. It's that guy. What's his name? John Shannon. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And then underneath him, you have another individual who is, I can't remember the title, but That person...
There are 6 undersecretaries,
right.
And then under that there are about 30 assistant secretaries, and then it goes down from there to total about 70,000 people altogether.
Right.
Worldwide.
From what I gather, the third person, there's a deputy, and then there's one other principal.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Undersecretary for Political Affairs, yes.
Thank you.
A career guy.
Right,
yeah,
and that person, I understand, currently is a former diplomat who is now who has also worked for the Obama administration.
In that same job, right?
Yes, and now he's that. And then there are all these undersecretary positions, undersecretary for the Western Hemisphere, undersecretary for Latin America, Asia, et cetera, et cetera. Those positions, those undersecretary positions, are not filled with Trump people. They are filled with acting undersecretaries. Oftentimes, those individuals are interacting with world leaders, their foreign secretaries, et cetera, or staff. They don't even agree with the Trump agenda, and so they're in these meetings with foreign officials, and they're rolling their eyes, according to people who were in the room that told me this. They're rolling their eyes when Donald Trump's name is mentioned. Now, how big a problem is that?
It's huge, and
it's huge. We lost what you said, so you said it's huge. Go ahead.
It's huge, yes, because what it means is Trump doesn't have full control of the State Department. The way a president exercises control over the bureaucracy is to get as many of his people into these key positions that you've mentioned some of as he can, because then they are loyal to him. They know what his policies are. They carry them out. The State Department, like other government departments, like a big aircraft carrier. It's not that it's filled with Obama holdovers. It's filled with people who have a culture that says to them, we should be running foreign policy, not these political appointees who come in on top of us. So it's perfectly understandable as a human reaction. What they were doing the day before Trump was inaugurated, they're going to do the day after he was inaugurated unless they're told to do something differently. So by not staffing the department, we're not talking about large numbers of people. I mean, counting ambassadors sent overseas, a couple hundred political appointees max in a bureaucracy of 70,000. And right now, political appointees at the department, including lower level staffers and whatnot, I don't know, maybe 40, maybe less than that. But in terms of the president's own appointees, only 2 or 3. So this is a big problem in getting advice that's contrary to what the Obama administration was doing. It's no wonder that Tillerson is captured by the bureaucracy. He has so few people around him. All he hears is what the career people are telling him, as is, unfortunately, also the case at the National Security Council. Look, if you're a State Department worker and you want to be on the National Security Council staff in the Obama administration, it means it's because you support what the Obama administration is doing. And if you're still there a year after a new president takes place, you haven't changed your mind and are now trying to pursue the new president's policies. That's why there's some continuity at the NSC, and there should be, I think, right. But even a lot of the career people turn over when a new president comes in. That hasn't happened. And it's also true to a lesser extent at the Defense Department and the intelligence community. So Trump sits there in the White House, the bureaucracies, like those big aircraft carriers, are still on course from January the 19th when they were in the Obama administration.
And before we let you go, Theresa May over the weekend was essentially saying that it's not helpful to jump to conclusions about the terrorists who are making the lives of the working class Brits unpleasant, to say the least, with these attacks, as we saw on the tube last week. Now we find out that the chief suspect is a Syrian refugee. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, and had been held by Scotland Yard a week or 10 days ago. So that Trump's concern that the law enforcement in Britain had their eye on the guy but didn't do anything about it turns out to be correct. Look, Theresa May, to me, is a big disappointment. And here I think she's covering up from the days when she was Home Secretary, which is like Homeland Security in the United States. These are failures that could be attributed back to her tenure there and others as well. It was a disappointing reaction from our close ally.
Yeah, well, and again, raises the issue of admission of refugees, how that's changing the culture of Europe, and whether they can truly vet people who are coming into the country by what means? Are we vetting their intentions?
They can't.
Yeah,
they can't, and neither can we.
No. John Bolton, it's always great to talk to you, a former UN ambassador, as the president is set to deliver his speech tomorrow before the General Assembly at the United Nations. We'll take a break on the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40